Welcome to Trust the Journey. I'm Jason Moledzki. Our mission is to live, laugh, love, and learn together with you. We're here to create conscious connections through our practice of openness, honesty, vulnerability, humility, and trust. Trusting the entire journey. If you'd like a cost-free way of supporting the show, you could please subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify or Instagram, or leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also share the podcast with somebody directly if you know somebody that you feel would gain value from this episode. If you'd like to join the Trusted Journey family, you can do so by becoming a Patreon supporter. You can go to trustthejourney.today. That is our handle across the whole internet. It'll take you directly to our website, and right on the top of the page, you'll see the Donate Now button for Patreon. The Trusted Journey family is a wonderful group of people where we hold a safe space for everybody to vulnerably share and support each other in a family environment. It's a wonderful group. I'm super stoked about the way that that's progressing. And if you would like to get a hold of me, you can find me at jasonmoledzki.com. If you're looking for my co-host, Melanie Curtis, you can get her at melaниecurtis.com. And today I'm super excited because I'm doing another episode of Walking Each Other Home with my very good friend, Jamie Crawford. I'm here today at Jamie's place, and he's been kind enough to allow me to record here in his home. And I've been really excited about doing this episode for a really long time because Jamie sits on my personal board of directors. He's one of the people that I lean to and look to in my life for guidance when I'm trying to make big decisions about things that are affecting me. He's been a spiritual inspiration, somebody that I look up to in so many ways, just his outlook on life, his way that he leads with his heart and the spiritual journey. And I'm lucky to call Jamie one of my very best friends. He's an absolute amazing human. So welcome to the show, Jamie.
Thanks for having me, Jay. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. I've been wanting to have you on the show for ages because we have these deep, meaningful conversations. And the number of times that I have been in conversation with you and gone, man, I wish I was recording this right now. The number of times that has happened has just been like completely overwhelming. So I'm like, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to get us together and get a microphone in front of us and just talk a little bit.
Yeah, we can touch a lot of areas of the cosmos, I think, with all the different conversations we've had over the years, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about a little bit about, before we just jump into outer space and in inner space, I want to talk about the social space because I think it's a really neat thing how we met, how we became friends, because Facebook is this strange place that has like positive and negative views, but really that's how we ended up being friends. Is like we saw each other being ourselves in our common friends group, and we're like, hey, I think I'm supposed to be friends with you.
Yeah, I know that's true. And then, but I think really the first time we hung out was at Burning Man, though, right?
Yeah,
that was really when we got to know each other.
Yeah,
and I knew you were like, some kind of famous skydiver or something, but I didn't really know any details, and that wasn't, we're at the Burn, so we met in a different way than through our skydiving or base jumping careers, so it's kind of a nice, organic way of getting to know each other. I felt like, it was like just, hey, what's your name? And I'm Jamie, you're Jay, and let's go out and all this. And that was a great burn we had together. I remember Tucci telling me this. She's like, yeah, Jay came back, like, I met this guy. I think he's going to be one of my friends for a long time. And, yeah, you're right. So
yeah,
it's been a 7 years, something like that.
Yeah, I think at least, yeah, just over. Yeah. So you've been such a guide to me on the spiritual path. One of the early things that happened in our friendship is you basically kind of taking me by the arm and saying, you need to come do ayahuasca. Like, I've been on this mission. This is something that I've been doing. I really think this would be good for you. And it's absolutely changed my life. It's changed who I am as a person. And I'm in such gratitude and such just like it's almost a sense of debt for this, like, taking me by the hand and literally walking me home in this effort to get to know myself better. And now I continue to work to pass that forward to other people with that same intention of just love and gratitude and like, let's keep walking each other the same path.
Yeah. Well, and and you also listen too, which the first time that was 8 years ago, 2015, 2016, I believe was the first time I did ayahuasca. That's when I went to Peru with my ex, and we spent, 12 days in the jungle at the Temple of the Way of Light, which is I didn't know at the time, it was one of the most like hardcore ways you could try ayahuasca the first time, because you do 7 ceremonies in 9 nights or something like that. So it was like really intense. So I think I maybe a year or two after that's when you came and did your first one with me. And that's when we did a 3-day ceremony that time. But, it's the calling. So once you experience that medicine, you want to share with everyone that you love. And I've told a lot of people about it, but only a few people listen. You happen to be one of those guys who had the courage and the interest and the curiosity to say, oh, yeah, I'll give that a shot, And when you first go in, you're like, oh, I'm pretty good. I think I'm pretty good. I'm pretty happy. I got, and you feel like you are. And then once you dive into, to the medicine, you start realizing how multi-layered your life is. And so all the things we do to try to heal ourselves. And, I think I consider base jumping a medicine as well, just like plant medicine. There's obviously medicine can be abused just like anything else. And also there's times when you don't need medicine anymore. And sometimes, I've come and go with base jumping in my life. I've come and go with plant medicine in my life. I've come and go with sobriety or, using drugs and partying. I've tried all the different fields of consciousness to see how to better myself. You and I have always had a good dialogue about that. We have a similar path. We have a similar problems that we've worked on to self-medicate, to find out who we were along the way. And we're both getting older now and starting to realize, well, then maybe those were tools, and maybe there's a refining process along the way in our lives that gets more definite, more clear, where I don't feel like personally anymore I'm needing those plant medicines as much anymore. I'm needing to microdose, or I'm needing to go on have a big psychedelic journey. And we and you've been talking about this a lot lately too. I've been way more into meditation lately. And I've been doing a daily practice, meditating an hour a day. But the last 3.5 months, I haven't missed a day. And myself and Tucci have been doing Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. And we're having amazing, profound results, just as if I'd just done a 3-day ceremony with you, just as if I'd gone to the jungle or gone and, spent some time alone and had a really powerful psychedelic experience. And I'm having that in my meditations. So, I'm always trying to get, and I think this is something that me and you resonate on a lot, is we're always trying to, I'm not getting older. We're not getting older thinking it's time to just go sit on the couch now. We're getting older every day thinking, oh, I'm running out of time. I need to keep this train going. What's the purpose of being on this planet? I think it's evolution, right? It's to evolve your soul. Your soul comes here with a purpose, with a blueprint, with things that you're trying to figure out, and you meet the right people along the way that help you figure those things out. Sometimes enemies, sometimes friends, but they're all there to serve you and to help you better yourself, right? So now, I think something we've picked up on is learning I love the darkness and all the bad times that I've had now as much as I do the good. I just saw you crash your car just earlier, break a windshield, and I know the old Jay 5 years ago or whatever that would have been that's your baby, you love that car, and then you were able to just be whoop, such a transition in you like that, to be unfazed by it and just move on, because actually it's not a big deal in the big picture. It's our attachment to everything that makes everything a big deal. So it's really cool to see you just kind of brush that off and move away, and just it was no big deal, and it wasn't. It was because you decided it wasn't. And that's what I'm really learning right now too, is you have the power to decide. The world pushes us with emotions, with sensations, with all kinds of energy and vibration that's telling you that you should respond this way because this happened. But in actuality, you don't have to decide. You can decide however you want. You can literally do that. I told this story to you before, and I'll tell it again online because it's such a powerful experience for me. When I was a teenager, our house has gotten broken into. My mom was freshly divorced. She's trying to raise 2 kids by herself. My dad was the breadwinner. My mom had to go and start over. She was painting houses or something to raise us. And literally all of our house got stolen, everything in it. The back windows were broken. Our house had totally gotten looted. And I'm crying. My sister's crying. And I'm a mess. My mom's kind of holding it together. And then she just within a few minutes turns and looks at me and she goes, well, at least we don't have, we've got less stuff to move now when we leave the house. And she just put a smile on her face, and she literally just changed her reaction. She decided she wasn't going to be the victim of that situation. She was going to, and I was like, what? You can do that? You can just decide. You don't have to just be the victim of a situation that should be victimizing you. You can decide not to do that. And it was a really powerful moment for me. I was a teenager, and I was a young teenager, and I was like, wow, they're not, and I'm 46 now, so it's still taken me a while to apply that understanding. I've known it for a long time, but now I'm getting to the place in my life where I'm able to start applying that. Just like I saw with you yesterday when you broke your windshield, and you're just like, okay, cool. I'm not going to victimize myself. I'm not going to beat myself up about that. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to go on to the next thing. And then you're not attached to it, and you're able to kind of just go on and not let it affect you that way. So anyway, that's something that I'm really excited about right now, as I'm actually to the stage of my life now where I'm able to start applying these things in an experiential way. It's not just a concept or a philosophy or us just talking crap around a fire sometime, and sounding like we're these really highly evolved beings, and then go back the next day to bitching about someone in traffic or all the things we do and our, patterns of kind of lower vibrations. And I'm really, it's an exciting time to be alive right now. And I'm really glad that we're here. Though, we didn't go in like 10 years ago or whatever and managed to make it to this older age. There's something about getting older and wiser and learning from your experiences, And I think probably the chemistry has something to do with it as well. I'm sure, when you're young, you're just pumping full of testosterone and hormones and everything going on, and that really affects how you see and perceive the world. And as you get older, everything starts to slow down more.
Well, wouldn't you agree that there's an element of identity in youth that is based on our activities and the things that we're filling our life with? And as we get older and some of those things that we've built up as who we are no longer apply anymore, or maybe they get removed from our lives, and then we find ourselves going, yeah, I used to be a full-time skydiver. I know you did tandems for a long time, and I was a pro swooper, and then the next thing you know, we're not doing that anymore, and we have to rebuild our identities. And that allowing the attachment to go, sometimes isn't comfortable, and it's like it's forced out of us, and we have to re-identify ourselves. And when we start to do that, we go, well, actually, what do I want? Instead of having just something that happened, like we chose skydiving or base jumping or whatever coping mechanism we were choosing at the time. Now we're at a maturity level and a age in our lives where we I'm going to pick something that's actually very considerate of all aspects and well-rounded and, ego aware.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're not trying so hard anymore when when you're younger, you're trying to build a sense of self. Who am I in the world? Where do I belong? Trying to find out who you are. I think at this age now, for me at least, I know who I am. I feel like I still want to grow who I am. I still want to evolve who I am, but I'm not searching in the same way as I was when I was younger. So I'm not trying to pick up activities, so I'm a base jumper or I'm this guy or whatever. That's not how I want to identify anymore. I want to identify as a human being that can, and what is with a larger purpose, not just as this is me and this is the pocket that I fit into, but how do I actually feel fulfilled at the end of this life? That's the bigger question that I'm at right now. Am I going to look back and say, oh, thank God I did all those base jumps, that really made a lot with that life, is that going to be the thing, or is there something more than that? For me, the answer is something more than that. I've always felt like I wanted to be able to give back to the world in a way that would be of benefit, to be able to service the best feeling, and that's why I did tandems for so long. It's because I loved the feeling of being of service, of making myself invisible in the background. There's a person in front of me that has no clue how to skydive, and my best tandems were when I would unclip them after we would land, and they would run to their friends, and they wouldn't even have a clue that I was there. They would just felt like they just jumped out of a plane and they did everything by themselves, and then they don't even think about thanking me or anything. And I'm like, that's the best that I could imagine doing, because I remove myself from the picture. I get to give because that was something I was skilled at, and make that person, that stranger, feel empowered and walk away with a completely different paradigm shift in their whole life. So that was always my goal as a tandem instructor. It really taught me a lot about how powerful it was for me too, and I got more out of it that way than a lot of goals of my own personal goals that I've done, from jumping the Eiger or some big building or all these ideas that I have of my own passions. It's great when you get them done, but there's just something better about being of service, that is more fulfilling in the act itself, that I've really gravitated towards more and more as I've gotten older as well. Where that's what I want to do. I want to be of service. I want to, that feeling of helping other people is more satisfying for me than achieving some of my own personal dreams.
So
at
let
this
me ask
point.
you a question with regards to your own self-care and self-love habits in your ability to be of service. Do you feel like your life has pivoted since? It's kind of a loaded question, I guess, because I know you somewhat, but I've observed your life pivoting around self-awareness in the greater sense where what you were doing with your life was very giving, but it also wasn't very serving of you,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
yourself was being sacrificed physically, emotionally, you do all right financially, but big picture, it's not really like a big sustainable thing.
Yeah.
And then when you leave, your emotional being, your ego being, all these things aren't really being thought about. It's just about giving to others. And what I've seen in the last 7 years or so has been you changing from being somebody who only thinks about somebody else having a positive experience to somebody who goes, wait, I need to be centered and really grounded and balanced and able to be aware of myself fully consciously before I can really be of service to others.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I definitely, and definitely through ayahuasca ceremonies, I started this process, but then I really had a completion process with this through Dr. Joe's Dispenza. We went and did a week-long meditation retreat with him. And I realized I had I was in meditation. It was like 3 or 4 days, and you're meditating like 8 or 10 hours a day with 2,000 people for a week in a row. And so you start building this resonance, and every meditation gets stronger and stronger. And I had this kind of third person body experience where I kind of came out of my body and I was looking at myself, having my inner dialogue with myself, the way that I usually speak to myself inside my mind, like the inner dialogue. And I was witnessing it from like a third person view. So I was watching me talk to myself in my mind. And I realized like I would never talk to any one of my friends like that. I realized how basically judging I was of myself, and how hard I was on myself all the time. The way that I speak to I'm very open and relaxed and forgiving with all my friends. But then when it came to myself, I was really strict and stern and almost abusive in the way that I was speaking to myself. And I had this moment where I realized, wow, I would never talk to anyone like that. And you're talking to me like that. And it flipped. And I really realized that there was a part of me that wasn't loving myself. That was still hadn't forgave myself or accepted myself, whatever. I saw a lot of stuff from my childhood with my dad and like all this brainwashing I got when I was a kid about emotions and being sensitive and all this stuff. And anyway, I started, obviously it was a very emotional experience and cried, but I really, all of a sudden, I was the first time I felt like 100% switch where I was able to love myself exactly the way that I love my friends and my family. So the big switch. So it's like, because I realized, if you're really going to practice what you're preaching, the only way you can be a good healer is to first have healed yourself. We always talk about this, and it comes and goes in conversations, but actually to think about what that means and to apply it to your life. I mean, it's the same. I was a habitual user of whatever it was, some kind of substance I always had crutches for my life. When I was a tandem instructor, everyone parties a tandem instructor. Oh, it's always a beer at the end of the day or whatever, something along those lines. And that became a habit of 10, 15 years of my life. And so even though I always had good intentions and I was walking in the right direction, I still had these crutches my whole life and I realized at a certain level, at a certain time, if I really want to practice what I preach, I'm really going to talk about spirituality and evolution and having life purpose, then I'm going to have to make a transition myself. And so lately, Tucci and I, we've come off all substances, and I'm literally just using meditation now. And meditation is the I think for me the most direct route that I've found so far to tap into my soul, into my heart. And I've really been working a lot on that. There's a lot of studies right now with EKGs, with neuroscience, where there's seeing how the heart and the mind interact with each other. It's fascinating. So I just watched this. It's actually on Gaia. It's called The Power of the Heart. It's a great little movie. And they're in the beginning of the movie, they have EKGs set up on the heart and then also on the brain. and they had a computer screen set up where they had random images that would pop up. The person had to click the mouse, and then a random image. Some of them were designed to invoke like fear and anxiety and stress, like violent images. And some of them were designed to be peaceful and benevolent, and like friendly, like bunnies, fluffy bunnies, whatever, stuff like that. And then in between each in frame, there would be a pause, a black screen for about 5 or 6 seconds. And they were randomized. So they noticed 100% of the time when someone would click and there was a black screen, the heart would intuitively know what the next image was going to be before it happened. And they saw the heart would self-regulate. So when the heart knew that there was going to be a violent image coming, it would slow the heart rate down during that 5-second black screen. It would slow down to regulate it. So when the violent or intense image come up, its heart rate wouldn't spike too much. So the heart would, every single time, 100% with every person they tested this on, the heart would self-regulate. Every time it knew there was going to be, so the heart is intuiting what's going to happen before it happens. So that's a whole nother discussion by itself. So where is the heart working? And as far as like time space goes, is the heart a multidimensional organ? Is there some kind of connection in that energy center there that is outside of time and space the way we know it? That's in a whole nother ballgame. Just thinking about the fact that the heart can that's what they say, trust your gut feeling comes from. And they proved this through all of the studies of the EKGs, that the heart first tells the mind and then the mind tells the body. So the heart, mind, body, and that's when you get the feeling in your gut. It happens so fast, right? So the heart is actually the first one to tell the body what to do. And it's so interesting. Also, the heart is one of these things, the only organ outside of the brain. So once the body shuts down, the heart decides when it stops. It doesn't listen. The brain doesn't tell the heart when to stop. The heart tells itself when to stop. So the heart has nerve cells, like brain nerve cells there. There's ganglia. There's brain neuron. Yeah. So it has an intelligence, a wisdom that I think I've always felt and I've always known. And it's so cool to see science is starting to talk about this stuff. But, right before I got into Joe Dispenza's work, I was like, I really want to align my heart and my mind together. So I've always trusted my heart, but I haven't trusted my brain, and there's a lot of reasons around that, childhood stuff and whatever, but so I've been always working on that. And then we found Dr. Joe's work, and he's like, that his main statement right now is working on bringing the heart and mind together, because they're together. When they're harmonized, they work so much more powerful than anything else I've experienced. So that's lately with my meditations, everything I've been doing is to try to align my heart and my mind together and try to act from a place like that. I'm Scottish, lineage from Braveheart days, and so I have a fiery temper. I always have. I've gotten way better as I've gotten older, but I'm quick to react. I have a firecracker refuse, and I'm fine until I'm not. And so I've been really working on that as well. Every time I want to react with my mind, because I'm very observant as well too. And so sometimes I lose patience with what seems like should be common sense. Maybe common sense isn't that common anymore. People say that, but I hope that's not true. But things just trigger me. And so I've been, instead of reacting out of my mind, I've been thinking, take a breath and think through my heart. And when I do that, it's just, everything changes. And I don't react the same way. I can see that, that person clearly didn't mean to cut me off or be an asshole. They were just struggling. Most people in their lives are stressed out and struggling. And we taking it personally all the time, and it really has nothing to do with us at all, And so it's like learning to just take that reaction away, just like you did yesterday. It's like when you take that reaction away, and there's no power over you anymore, and then all of a sudden you're not victimizing yourself by judging other people. And so I realized, the reason, if I'm judging all these people all the time, it's because I'm judging myself too. And I realized that, like I said in that meditation I was in, I realized I was judging myself so much all the time. Just be kind to myself. Be patient. You're and I've always felt that. I've always felt like this discrepancy between my genetics, with the body that I'm in, and my soul. I always felt like my soul is way more evolved than the genes and the knowledge and the ego. Jamie, he's got some work to do. He's got some catching up to do with where my soul wisdom feels. Where I've always felt that kind of trying to bridge that gap was difficult.
I'm a big believer in the Trinity concept, the me, myself, and I, the body, mind, and soul, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, this like sun, earth, moon kind of thing. There's three elements, right? And I feel like the brain is the logical thinking, right? Like very cognitive, right? Uses words, right? Like literally words are going on. And the heart is feeling, emotion, love, right? It's very feeling based. And then the soul is just more of a vibration. There's more of just like a resonant energy that is like, it's like listening to music versus having a feeling or having a thought, right? You can't really describe music as something that it's like a merging of all things, right? And I completely relate to you with the idea that as a young man, I've always known that my soul has a much greater intelligence than my body might have at that current time. And my mind can be totally all over the place. Sometimes my mind could be highly conscious of itself and very clear thinking, and other times just completely a wreck or foggy or spiking in one direction or another, very untrustworthy. Not really something that I can say, something that I really would say, oh yeah, that's something I would always go to for the right decision. Maybe depends how tired I am, if I've eaten, a lot of other variables. How stressed have I been? How much load have I been under? If it's been a 16-hour or 20-hour day, my mind's not going to respond as well as if I'm, an hour just out of bed and things are fresh and ready to go. Yeah. So I don't really trust that part of myself. But like you're saying, the heart energy doesn't really relate to that. Right. Like the heart energy is this compassion, love, warmth.
It's like an old wise person that's there all the time with you all the time and just waiting for you to listen to them. And it's, and you're always like, yeah, fuck you, old guy. I know what I'm doing. And then, then you're like running around. And then eventually you're like, maybe I should listen. And then you do. And you're like, oh, God damn it, he was right. And, now instead of just doing that whole chase that I used to do all the time, I'm trying to stop that from happening. But right as I find myself getting into the sprint, I'm like, ask the heart. And I do that, and I just cancel out the rest of that whole commotion and just be like, okay, because I like that saying. It says the mind thinks and the heart knows. If you really think about it, anytime you've had a big decision, anything major going on, or big life-changing experiences, you have to think about every time that you listen to your heart, it's right. It's never lies to you. It never tries to trick you. It never tries to say you should do this because it doesn't have your ego in mind. It just has your soul. It has everyone's best intentions in mind, And then so I've always had that as a superpower. Like I'm emotional. I'm a ginger, man. I grew up with a little redhead kid getting made fun of, and because I'd cry and I was sensitive, and whatever, all those things. And then I realized it was my superpower. I still felt like a man. I actually feel like it takes more courage. We've been brainwashed to think that being a man means that you don't have emotions and that you don't feel anything and that you can't cry and all of this garbage. That's not real. That's not true. And it's actually unhealthy to be like that. We need to train men to feel safe and comfortable to express their emotions and to do it in a way that's safe for everyone else to hear, not a violent, overtoning way, alpha male kind of dominant. That's old monkey brain, right? That's chimpanzee stuff. Like I told you, I don't know if you. I just watched. It's called the Chimp Planet or Chimp. It's on Netflix, but it's a 4-part series, and they follow these chimpanzees through this African jungle for like 12 years, and it's so mind opening to watch that, to really see how. Because, the chimps have their territory in the jungle. They literally kill other chimps that try to come on their territory. They go and actively try to expand their territory to take over good fruit trees and good places. They have a whole alpha male system where all the males in the tribe are trying to make, get rid of the alpha male and become the next alpha male. And the violence and everything that goes on in the chimpanzee world, you're like, wow, like you can see what that, that's very inbred into our society and the way we act. But that's old news, man. We're not there anymore. We don't need to be there anymore. That part of us is dying, We need to get back. We need to get out of that whole fight or flight and then competition. with each other. We should be collaborating with each other, right? The only way this planet's going to survive, the only way we're going to survive on this planet is if we collaborate and come together and harmonize our energy together instead of listening to the 1% tell us that you guys should be competing, you guys should be fighting with each other. Because that's what's the best way to, dominate a society is to keep them fighting against each other. It's divide and conquer. It's one of the oldest principles, Machiavellian principles that you can think of. They still use it today. So everyone's distracted fighting against each other. They don't really see what the real problem is. It's not us. We should be teaching each other how to come together instead of compete, how to fight, not to fight, how to love, how to accept each other for our differences. And the only way I believe that you can do that is by doing it for yourself first. Because all these people I'm pointing my finger at, what do they say? When you point your finger, you got 3 fingers pointing back at you, right? So, it's like this is the case all the time. I was been so judgmental of myself because I was taught to do that. If you're different, it's not okay. You need to conform. You need to be like everyone else. You need to do this and this and this. And if you don't, then you're a reject. And, and at some point I was like, well, fuck it. I'll be a reject. Okay. I'll be the rebel. I'll do that. And that was about how I first got my foot out the door of, normal society. And then I came to realize I was onto something, actually. There is something phony about this world and what we've been taught. And we're all kind of waking up now and realizing this is not what I expected to be human. This is not what I came here for. I didn't come here to just to warmonger and fight over materials and look whose eco's shinier than someone else's. That's not what it's about.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So my experience as a child, as my consciousness arrived to a point where I could see the world around me with a broader lens, and I could really get I moved past like my immediate friends group, and I could see the planet as a whole. I could see other cultures, I could see other species, and I could see the programming coming in, and I could see the behaviors that were occurring, and I felt like this isn't right. Like, this isn't natural. Like, none of it felt like it was the way that it's supposed to be.
Same.
And then as my life progressed into my early teens and 20s, it felt like a movie. I was watching a bad movie. It felt like I was watching a bad movie.
Like a Truman Show.
Yeah, I'm watching this bad movie, and I'm like, what is going on here? Like, am I a character? I'm obviously a character in this movie, but am I writing the movie? And do I have any control over the script? And I felt this real duality between my ability to like already know the path of who we are to begin with, like a light being, love, consciousness, connective, community, family based, like just pure energy, but then also being polarized in this sense. Like, I still had major temper issues when I was young, and so there was parts of me that resonated with the bad movie.
Yeah, right? Totally. Yeah.
So
I bought into it still.
So my question to you is, like, who were you? Like, how do you identify with yourself before that recognition of time? Like, what was your name before you were born is the koan that asks that question. And then as you come back to self-awareness now, where you've been coming, full circle, how do you see yourself now? Do you relate to that same child mind?
It's an interesting question. The thing for me was that I always felt different and like I didn't belong ever since. And then, a lot of it was my physical appearance, just a ginger kid, like that's
growing up
in England, which still had ginger kids, but that was, from the beginning, if you're different at all, kids are brutal, right?
Yeah.
No matter what, like even if you just had some little minor difference, that was something that everyone made fun of. But so that was always there, but I also just felt that in general anyway. I always felt like I just didn't fit in correctly. And so from the very beginning as a child, I remember when I was in England, I moved away from England when I was 7. My dad is a cinematographer, and so that's what brought us out to the United States. And even then I remember thinking, man, like, I feel like the adults are lying to me. Like, I feel like there's something off here. Like, there's something just doesn't feel right. And I knew that as a child, like 6, 7 years old. And I, as I got older, I still felt that, and I still didn't feel like I belonged, like I fit in. I still felt like something was wrong. And then as I got into my teenage life, I just knew I had to rebel, and I didn't know why. I didn't have the knowledge yet. I didn't have the life experience. I just felt, man, fuck this. I'm not gonna buy this. I'm gonna rebel. I don't know why, but I know I need to. And I did anarchy for a while, And then eventually I got to psychedelics, and I got into meditation. Because I was digging, man. I was taking comparative religion, nutrition, all kinds of classes, and through college and high school, trying to figure out, what is the point of being here? We just like suck in air and that's it, and and then just like,
yeah, yeah.
or is there a higher purpose? Like, why
Yes.
are we here?
Yes.
Like that. So I was always fascinated with that. That's always been my biggest fascination with consciousness. What is the point? Why is everything so? Why is there nothing else competing with us on this planet? Like why is there's whales and dolphins, and now we're understanding there's lots of species that have even higher knowledge and intelligence than we do, but they're not out there building internets and trying to defeat nature and trying to destroy viruses, and there's a lot to go around that we can get back into later. But so I was always super fascinated with that, and then I started realizing, especially I have to give credit to psychedelics. Mushrooms were my first experience that really opened my mind and really made me believe that what I was feeling was real, because I'd felt this thing in the background my whole life, and I never had a way to understand it, and I never had anyone to help me with it. And I did mushrooms, and I went in the forest with my friends, and I had this experience where I was meditating under this tree, and I could feel the roots vibrating, and I was like, what are they talking or something? And this is 30 years ago. And yes, then you start watching Paul Stamets now and all this stuff, and they say that's literally how the trees talk to each other, is they create this vibrations in their root systems, and I heard it and I felt it because I was on mushrooms, and I was like, and I had this, it really just expanded my awareness to this bigger consciousness that was all around us, and then I was like, okay, I wasn't, thank God I wasn't wrong. I'm onto something, and I know, and that really even set the fire in motion at that point. Got heavy into meditation, fire walking, sweat lodging, whatever I could get my hands on to try to expand my field of awareness.
What age was this that you were diving into this?
About 15 to 18, 19, and then after college I went really hard into, like, I had 8 years of complete sobriety. I meditated pretty much every single day from about age 20 to 28 or so. And that was a big, big spiritual journey I went on. But, it was kind of bad timing in the sense that no one else my age was doing anything remotely close to that. So I was hanging out like a bunch of 50-year-olds and stuff, like these meditation classes and whatever. And so I was having this hard time relating to their lives and what they were talking about. And I was missing some of the chaos, because part of me was totally, and still is, addicted to the chaos. Got to be honest about it, right? I went till 28 pretty hard on that program, and then I just said, I'm kind of bored and lonely right now. Like I don't have anyone in my age group to hang out with or relate to. So I actively chose to go back into the chaos and the party scene, into everything, and kind of drop away from that more monk style life that I had for a while. I gained so much knowledge and information in that time, though, and it really helped me now in my later years come back to this field of spirituality that I've really dedicated myself to.
Yeah, so I want to touch on a couple points. One, psilocybin mushrooms were a huge catalyst for me as well. I had early experiences with LSD in my teens, into my 20s, and they were mind-opening, but they didn't have the same kind of deep connection to self, connection to a greater purpose, connection to higher intelligence. And it's like, say, you felt the trees vibrating, and that's a connection to a higher intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Like there's obviously a intelligence outside of ourself. And one of my early psilocybin experiences at a high dose in solitude was one of having to find forgiveness for people that in my life that I was very angry at, that I had a lot of anger. And that anger was just living in me. I wasn't around those people at all. Like, I lived in another country. They weren't even in my life. I'm just going through my day-to-day life, living my life and thinking I'm doing great, but inside I'm actually full of anger towards these individual, and then recognizing I need to find forgiveness and express that forgiveness. And so I'm really grateful for psilocybin's continual arrival throughout my life at different points of need to help me find these bridges that I didn't even know I needed to cross.
Yeah.
Right. And the other part I wanted to touch on is, so you said, 15, 18 to like 28 years old. So that good chunk of like, 10 plus years of early adulthood.
Yeah.
And a lot of meditating going on at that time. And then the meditating stopped.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now the meditating's back.
Yeah. Yeah. I dropped off, and it's funny, right? The 28-year cycle, or, I think a Saturn return is 28 years. And I think every 7 years you're having, your cells regenerate pretty much in all of your body. And that's 28 is a cycle of 4 of that. But I have noticed that's a very interesting point to bring up, actually, almost to the key. Every 7 years I go through cycles in my life, I've noticed, where another cycle starts. It's very interesting. Without you thinking about it, you just go back and look. You're like, whoa, I had this big change in my life. Oh, wow, that was, again, 7 years. That's right on the mark. I had a big relationship change, or like a career change, or, the way that you interact with the world has completely shifted. So I'm really glad that I had that time in my life, and I'm glad that I'm able to come back to it now, and really enjoy and understand what it's about. And I'd be excited about it. I'm excited about it. Every day I get up, I can't tell you, dude, I've never been excited to, but I can't wait to meditate. I'm stoked.
That's awesome.
I'm stoked on it, you know? I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? It's because I'm having there's so much in there, there's so much in there. And I every time I go, and you get better and better at journeying. And the more you do it, the more you practice it, just like riding a bike, just like base jumping, just like any activity. You just get better at it the more you do it. Yeah. And I say, so now I'm just so excited to just keep getting better at it.
So I had a similar experience in the context that when I started skydiving at 21 years old, I learned to meditate because of skydiving. I didn't know that I already knew moving meditations through motorcycles and bicycles and athletics, where it was like the moving meditation, but I actually learned seated meditation because of skydiving, where I would sit in the plane and I would and visualize the thing that I was going to. So it's visualization. It's another word for meditation.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
It's a form of meditation.
Yeah, it's a form of meditation where we're actually planting an image within our quantum field that we're saying, this is what is going to happen in my future. And I also learned by going into competition skydiving to sit straight back, completely chill, lots of other energies around. Energies that are anxious, energies that are aggressive, all these different types of energies in the airplane of people who are having their own experience, getting ready for their own round of competition, and to just be non-reaction, non-attachment to any of these energies, whether there's anxiety around the wind or the altitude or the speed or something, or whatever's happening that's causing elevated energies to occur. I'm just going to stay completely unattached. And this is honestly one of the two big keys to my competition success, is this non-attachment to these energies around me, not relating to them at all. And then also having these visualization practices of following a mantra within my head silently over and over and over again that affirmed the elements of my performance that I needed to execute in order to perform. And I developed that mantra based on identifying my areas of error, where my weaknesses were and where I tended to make repeated mistakes. And so I would anchor in the positive things that needed to occur at those points by repeating them in like a 6 or 7 step mantra over and over again in time with my breathing. So I'd repeat the mantra, breath, repeat the mantra, breath internally, and maintain that throughout the entire skydive. And so I don't ever think consciously about anything else except for those words through in my head, and all the other things just happen automatically. So why do I want to take the time to repeat this for our listeners who've heard me talk about it before? Is because the meditations that you and I are now both practicing have to do with this same kind of process, but it's not related to a physical action like completing a jump on a skydive or whatever athletic endeavor that might be, whether it's a long jump or who cares, it doesn't make any difference, right? It's more about embracing an energy. And this same element existed in that, but I wasn't always as attuned to it. It was just happening naturally, which is like embracing the love of the feeling of being successful and just loving doing what I'm doing, right? And so I would go into my heart energy that says, I'm going to totally win this. And there's no doubt. There's zero doubt. It is 100% belief, confident, zero question in my mind. This is what is going to happen. And that's not an ego piece.
No, it's a way of manifesting it.
It's a way of manifesting it. Yeah. But, and feeling that feeling, like just like laying in a hot bath of that feeling of this is already done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so interesting when you were saying that, I was just thinking about like, man, imagine if we could do that with even just another 20% of our life, right? Because a lot of people, we do it with high stress situations. We do it when we're putting ourselves in extreme sports, when we're like having to get into a flow state, when I'm like forcing myself into a corner when I'm like base jumping, for instance. I'm making myself have to get into that headspace because I'm doing a dangerous activity. So that's why I'm enjoying the shift in meditation now, is because I'm just sitting on my couch. I'm not putting myself in any kind of stressful situation. I am just inducing this because I know it's good for me now. So I'm taking away like the applications of force, like if you eat mushrooms or you take ayahuasca,
you have no choice.
You have no choice.
Yeah.
See you later. You're gonna have to do it now, and if you don't, good luck, whatever. But you're putting yourself in that corner where now I'm just making the decision. So I'm taking away one of these tools, I guess you could say, and just making that more of my conscious decision. So yeah, it's I've thought about that a lot, Jay. Is like, how do I apply like exactly what you just talked about, the thing that you developed to become a world champion in swooping? How do I develop that into my life where I can use it on a daily and not feel like overwhelmed by this idea that I have to overthink everything and I have to visualize all this stuff all the time? How do I how do I simplify that practice to where I can just be in a flow state for the day, doing mundane things? And also, by the way, how do I enjoy mundane things? That's a big one. Because me and you are like, extreme everything, let's go. Yeah, okay, if you're going to do it, let's do it 120%. And then, and like, so with everything, and sometimes that's super not great. And I'm like, okay, so actually, how do I just enjoy folding the laundry? How do I enjoy just making
I actually love it.
Me too. But making this meditations out of it, right? And how it's clean, washing dishes, sweeping the floor, whatever, simple stuff like that, or driving somewhere to get something. Just being able to just be happy with what I'm doing as it is right now. And so I took a big step back from jumping for a while, also because I fractured my heels on a one wheel, but that's another story. But because of that process, I was able to step back and really kind of rethink about all of this. It's natural anyway I think as we get older that you want to start incorporating just, how do I be happy now? If I actually died right now, like sitting here talking to you, I'd be pretty stoked. Sitting with one of my best friends talking about life and spirituality, Well, how do I do the same thing if I'm in a stressful situation, or if I'm in a place of my life that I'm not necessarily happy with? How do I bring back all of these things I've developed through extreme sports and psychedelics and all these applications? How do I make that just available any moment that I need it? And for me, so far, meditation has been the way that's the next step for me, because it's bringing that closer every day. Like I told you, I've been doing this practice now 3 months straight, and I've noticed that just my default setting is different now. Just the transparency of the world is a little bit thinner. It's a little bit more see-through than it used to be. And I just I don't freak out as hard anymore. I don't take the bait when someone gives it to me, like, here, go ahead, freak out. And I'm like, no, I don't just do it now, So,
so I have this phrase that I like to use, which is life is an altered state. And I like the phrase because we think that we're in like default is normal. Like my perception of the world around me is normalized. This is the world. This is real, the reality, right? And I don't believe that.
I think you're right.
I don't believe that at all, because like the young me, the child I was talking about earlier that saw the world around me, goes, this is a mess. This isn't the real thing.
Yeah.
The real thing's nothing like this. Like this isn't playing the way that it's supposed to. So what you're just saying is like, oh yeah, when I'm base jumping or when I'm skydiving or when I'm doing riding a high-speed motorcycle sidecar or whatever it is that you choose to do, where you force yourself into a corner, you take a high psychedelic drug that makes you now have to meditate. You realize I'm in an altered state. Being at a high speed on a sidecar or being in an ayahuasca ceremony are altered states. And so we go into this like inside reflection, like quiet voice, outside voice, quiet, inside voice, listening, right? And really reflecting on what's going on inside of ourselves. And so I like to reflect that to the life is an altered state ideal, to say, am I recognizing that I'm currently high on life right now? And I could be having a bad trip, or I could be having a good trip, or I can be not even aware that I'm tripping. But the whole concept of just recognizing there should be no difference in our default reaction to how I'm observing my own reactions, whether I'm in a ayahuasca ceremony or whether I'm just sitting on the couch feeling a little anxious about something or agitated, or that, like, I noticed when I'm in an Aya ceremony, when my body itches and I get some like part that's scratchy and I can't, this is a physical representation of an emotional experience that I'm ignoring, right? My body's telling me, straight up telling me, you're bothered by something. Listen to it, right? That thing is annoying you and you're completely blocking it. So it becomes a physical manifestation of the body. And I start tossing, turning, and I go, hey, just listen to it. And I go, okay, well, what needs to be heard? And if I actually ask myself the question and say, what is this that needs to be heard? And shut up long enough in my own mind to hear what my body, soul, heart has to say about what needs to be heard, then I can actually give that attention or love or compassion or empathy or whatever emotion needs to be given to myself to actually heal that part, soothe that part, relieve it, rather than back to conscious everyday altered state of just living, shoving a donut in my face,
right,
or drinking a beer, or turning the television on, or whatever coping mechanism, numbing agent I'm going to default to, rather than like, so the consciousness is like sobriety, right? Like sobriety is truly being present to everything that's going on for myself and not numbing anything. No numbing agents at all. No sex numbing agent. No going, I'm going to go for a run, make myself feel better.
Right.
All of this is the same thing. I'm going to go base, I'm going to go skydive and do whatever it is just to make myself feel better. I'd love the idea of just making myself feel better by listening to myself.
Yeah.
My own needs.
Yeah. Being content with where you're at. Yeah. Which is an interesting dichotomy, right? Because there's that desire always to, at least for me, to evolve, to be a better version of myself the next moment than I was before. That's always there for me. But also then there's also this side that you need to just be happy with who you are. So that's that practice of, and this is what I kind of resonate with some of the Buddhist philosophy is the idea isn't, when they say non-attachment, that doesn't mean you just don't care anymore and you just don't, and you just sit there and do nothing. It means that you give everything still without attachment to the outcome. So that's the way you can still be present with who you are and still evolve yourself to the next day, is that you can still push and give energy and passion and resources to a better version of yourself without being attached to the outcome. Because if you do it that way, then the process of just pushing yourself in that direction is the reward, not what happens at the end of it.
And this is the journey is the destination modality,
right?
Right.
It's right. And that's concepts have floated around in my brain for a long time, but to actually, now I'm feeling like I'm having an experiential understanding of it now, where I feel that that's the way I can be present now, right? That's how I can be happy with the mundane. Is if I'm just present with who I am and be happy with who I am and not be judging of who I am, but at the same time know where my weaknesses are that I'm trying to work on and working towards them without attachment to the outcome, without attachment to if and when I get to it. Just the fact that I am trying and I'm putting my intention into it is the most important part, right? I've always said that intention is the most important of everything. I have friends that are tweakers, that are drug addicts. I have friends that are doctors in the ER. I have all friends of all kinds of walks of life, and the reason that the friends I keep in my life are the ones. Some of them just are better at life than others are, but because I know their heart's in the right place and their intention was good, even if they've screwed me over, even if they've burned me before, even if they made 100 mistakes to me towards, if I know their intention wasn't to actually hurt me or to be, mischievously taking advantage of me or any of those kind of things, if I know they just messed up, I have all the heart for them in the world, and so the same reason I can keep all kinds of walks of life and friends that way. But, the minute I feel like you're just someone that just will always try to take advantage of people around them, I don't want to be around that vibration. And that's okay. I'm not going to try to change you. I'm just going to walk away. That's it, and I'll let you do your thing. But that's what I base my model off right now of who I want in my life, is people that are intentionally trying to do the right thing, listen to their heart, trying to raise their vibration, even if they're failing miserably. The fact that they're putting their heart towards it, that's what counts the most for me.
This is why we're friends, right? So I want to touch on a couple points. I want to jump back to that period of sobriety in your 20s. But before we go there, I want to talk about some of our early friendship. I was going through a really rough period of re-identifying myself, trying to learn who I really am again, having peeled away at a number of my coping mechanisms. I was dealing with a serious bout of addiction, had all kinds of problems coming up. And you were going through another re-identification of self. You were splitting off in a marriage and stepping away from a career that you've been doing for ages, and alcoholism and drug use and things were just coming up. And I remember going to ceremony with you, and you spit out one of my favorite lines I ever heard. It just cracked me up so much. And you're giving your share to everybody, and you're like, oh, this and that. I threw my phone in the ocean, And I was like, that expression of
that'll serve you. That'll teach you.
I'll teach you. Yeah. I'll teach you. Me, I'm talking to me. I'm pointing three fingers at myself right now, right? I'll teach you for getting angry about whatever I'm angry about. That'll cost you $1,000.
Oh, that was $1,000. Oh, I hope I backed up my phone.
That time for me was really special, because that 2 or 3 years there where we were both really pretty rough. We were both pretty rough. Now that I look back at it, I looked at a photo from one of our first trips together.
Yeah, we're all puffy and
we look terrible.
Yeah.
And now I look at the photos of us together, I'm like, wow, we look like totally different people.
Yeah.
So I want to say thank you for that, because you've been a huge guide and real value in my life. And I want to spin us back to your early 20s, because there's a conversation that came up recently, which has been on the news a lot lately. And you shared it with me in confidence before. And before the show, I asked you if it's something you want to share about or not. So I'd like for you to tell me about your UFO experience.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And you're so, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, plus before that, I really didn't talk about this very often at all. I kind of buried it deep down in my conscious because I didn't really have a place to go with it. But it kind of resurfaced, and I ended up doing some hypnotherapy on it, and I'll explain why I did that. But so I grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, right, which is very close to Los Alamos National Labs, which is 50 miles away from there. That's where they detonated the first atomic bomb. A lot of UFO sightings and extraterrestrial stuff happens in that area, especially in New Mexico in general. There's a ton of sightings there, a ton of stuff that's gone on there. Anyway, I wasn't one of those people. I was in my 20s, like during my completely sober time, or I think I was 24, 25 when this happened. So right in the middle of that 8 years of me being completely sober, I didn't even do caffeine or sugar or anything, man. I was like clean as a whistle. Yeah, I was a monk. I was meditating every day. I was all about the spiritual life. I'm sure my vibration was pretty high. Anyway, I was with 5 other people. We were hiking a mountain in Santa Fe, New Mexico, above Santa Fe. Actually, it's called Sun Mountain. And we'd taken a break about halfway up this mountain. We all were planning on camping up there that night, doing an overnight, all sober. And we got about halfway up, we took a break, and we're looking out over the city, and there was one of these clouds, these lightning clouds. I don't know if you've seen those before, where the lightning's flashing inside the cloud, but it never comes out of the cloud. It's like, oh, that's cool. But it was like the only cloud in the sky that was doing anything. It was really weird. So I was just like watching that, and, just out of nowhere, this, football field size blue disc came out of this cloud. and parked probably 500 yards from us, because we were up on this mountaintop, and it was we're probably a couple thousand feet above Santa Fe at that point, and this thing was parked.
So you said football field size?
A football field size.
Huge craft.
Disc.
Yeah.
So huge and so close that I was completely paralyzed. So was everyone else that was with me. I tried to move. I couldn't. I could move my eyes, I remember, but I couldn't talk. I couldn't. All the hairs on my body were standing on end. I could hear this electromagnetic hum that I can't replicate. I've never heard it before that time, and I haven't heard it since. It's just this electromagnetic hum, and I've now, after much study, I've spent decades researching all this stuff, and because of this chain of events that happened from this. Anyway, so all of us sat there for 10, 15 seconds to really a long time, looking at the details of the ship, this electromagnetic field I could see around it that was distorting the space around the ship. And I was like, this is it. This is when we get abducted, And I was like terrified. I wasn't one of those guys believing in UFOs. I thought probably they exist, but I'm not out there chasing them. I'm not out there sitting outside at night trying to see stuff. I wasn't researching anything. I didn't have my mind in that at all. And so that happened. It made this crackling sound, like a little static crackle sound, and it disappeared. It was gone. And I was just kind of trying to get my bearings to look at my friends, and it reappeared, and it sat there again for 5-6 seconds. And then it shot back up into this cloud, and then this little lightning happened in there again, and then that was it. And we stood there for a while just trying to, figure out what happened, and then turn to talk, and it was terrifying. I was terrified. I'm not going to lie. I wasn't like, oh yeah, the guy, ETs are here. Great. Yeah, we're going to make contact. Great. No, I was like, oh, you're like in the presence of a technology of something that you would never have thought is real until you see it. And anyway, none of us camped on the mountain that night. Obviously, we were all scared, and we still did finish the hike and got to the top and said, well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going back down. I'm going into my house with my loved ones, and I'm going to lock the door. I'm scared. Right. So we kind of did that. Anyway, a few weeks later, I had this experience. I was talking to my wife at the time, and I was laying in bed, and I had already kind of forgotten about that, try to push it to the side of an unknown, unexplained experience.
Blocking it out.
Block that out for now, because I don't know what to do with that data. So just going to leave it there. And I felt kind of that same paralyzed feeling I felt when I was standing there by the ship. It's like, this is almost the same feeling as when you're in between being awake and asleep, where you feel like you're awake and you can see things in your room, but you feel like you can't move your body. I was feeling that, like this sleep paralysis people talk about. But I knew I was awake. I had my eyes open. I could see the light through the kitchen, through the bedroom, through the kitchen. I could hear my wife talking. And I felt my body lifting off my bed, and I thought, this is really strange. I feel a presence. I don't know what it is, but I feel the same kind of scared feeling that I felt when I saw the ship. And I forced my head up with all my might, and I look up and I see this transparent, like now they're calling them interdimensional beings, right? Because we know that this technology, for it to exist with electromagnetic energy and all, we can get into how these propulsion systems work and whatnot. But I saw a kind of a see-through, half transparent, just like you see in the movies, gray being, big eyes, one missing digit from the hand, so 3 big fingers and a thumb kind of thing. And it had its hand out over me, and it was kind of like halfway, like in my wall, like out from my wall over my head with its hand. And I just told it with my mind, I was like, you need to let me the fuck go, and it realized I was aware of it. And when it did, I felt my body literally fall back on the bed about an inch. I was like, that was weird, okay, I was probably asleep. I was probably having some weird trauma from what I saw 2 weeks ago, whatever. I tried to rationalize it, make sense of it, and just put it in that department of trauma from seeing this shit, right? Whatever. 2 weeks later, which is the craziest part, this is what I went to hypnotherapy for. I lost a whole day of my life. This is all during my sobriety. I've never had any mental, problems. I've never had any gaps of reality like that, especially being completely sober. I was very, very much aware of my surroundings, of my day-to-day moments. I'd never have lost that time. I lost a whole day of my life, literally, though. I remember going to bed the night before, and then the next thing I remember is 12 hours later, 13 hours later, waking up in my pickup truck in a dark forest in Los Alamos National Forest, which is 50 miles away from my house. This is before smartphones. I had a flip phone back then, didn't give any navigational stuff on it. I didn't have any maps that could have guided me there. I just woke up in a dark forest in my pickup truck in the middle of nowhere down a dirt road and was terrified. This is like 10 o'clock at night. And I wake up, I have no clue how I got there. I have no idea what happened. I can't remember anything except for going to bed, and it's dark again, and it's the next day. So I call my mom. I'm freaking out. I have a little bit of service on my phone. I say, Mom, I don't know what happened. I'm pretty sure like I've been kidnapped by humans. I wasn't thinking aliens or anything like that. I was just thinking, probably, I've been abducted. Someone's been stalking me, and I'm about to be murdered, and this is it. So I call my mom, who's crying hysterically, and she remembers this conversation. We just talked about it. The Mom, I'm going to die. I'm sorry. Like, you're a great mom. I just want to tell you I love you. I don't know where I am. I don't know what's going on. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be murdered, and she said, trying to calm me down and, talk me through it. Finally, she's like, well, start making rational decisions, look and see other keys in the truck. And then there was, and, so I start my truck and no one's there. My bed on my back, there's no like guy with a Jason mask ready to chop my head off or anything. And so I just drive down this dirt road for a few miles, actually, like pretty deep in this forest, and come out to a paved road that says Santa Fe 50 miles that way. I'm like, what the just happened, right? Like, what just happened? I lost a whole day of my life. I have all these messages on my phone, asking my wife, asking where I've been, and what have I been? People who knew that I should be around knew I wasn't around, and I just drove back home. Just in complete shock. Like, I had just shock feeling in my body the whole time, just like fear and shock, and got home and I couldn't make any sense of it. And what did I do? What can you do at that time? I just like, okay, I'm going to sound like a crazy person if I talk about this. So I'm just going to put that in that whole section of things that just happened. I'm just going to bury that deep. And I'm going to forget about it. And I did a decade or so, and then they started resurfacing. I started having these feelings come up about it. I started feeling like I needed to talk about it. I started feeling like I needed to research it. So I started researching UFO stuff a bunch, trying to find out if anyone else that claims to have had experiences like this, what kind of state of mind were they in, or are they actually crazy people, or are they people that are respectable in the sense that they've got careers and they're good sound of mind. And so I started really, really diving into it. And then I really wanted to figure out what happened, so I ended up doing a hypnotherapy session actually with Tammy. It was very eye-opening, actually. I thought probably I'd been taken up into a ship and they'd done experiments and whatever. That was my guess. But what I saw was that I actually got taken out of my truck down into a base. Like the same way that ET, that gray, was floating over me in my bedroom, it was able to change my molecular makeup to be able to do the same thing. And literally, I just saw myself get transported through the earth. Yes, through matter, to a base that they had that was in cahoots with the U.S. government, with Los Alamos National Labs, and that was a place where they were able to just carry out. This is the contract, right? They showed me they had a contract with the government that they were trading tech with the government for the ability and the freedom to do tests on human beings, right? There's a whole hybridization project that's been going on for a long time. I believe humans are an alien hybrid species. That's for sure, without a doubt in my mind now, because of what happened. Anyway, it showed me all the tests it did. I had this pain in my right hip, above my hip, and this little weird lump under my hip ever since then. It's always been sore. It's never changed, but I'm pretty sure that's a chip. I'm pretty positive of it. I want to get an MRI done to see if there's anything that's detectable on it, because anyway, when I did the hypnotherapy, I asked him, I said, what was the point? Like, because I felt like maybe I'm special, maybe I'm supposed to, have some kind of interactions with these beings. Maybe I'm in some past life, I'd been one of these beings. What's the thing? And they were kind of like, no, you're nothing special. You're like a lab rat for us. Like, you're just you had a different vibration than I believe that's why they chose me, because I was vegetarian. I was meditating every day. I was super clean, sober. My vibrational energy was very different than everyone else's that I was with in that group. And they probably pinpointed me out and thought, oh, this guy, we should study this guy and see what his deal is, because his vibration is very different than everyone else's in this group. So I think I was in the wrong place at the right time. They probably warped out of their electromagnetic travel And just, those ships are so intelligent. They have crazy AI on them, and they're scan the whole area, and they see, oh, they've got these life forms here, and they probably just, took an imprint of me and said, oh, we'll go check that guy out later. And I think that's all I was to them. They're like, yeah, that's pretty much it. And I was like, I asked them if I was going to have any more contact with them or interactions. And they're like, yeah, when we come and take the chip back, which is in, what do they say? When you're 65, you say, well, we've got a 40-year contract with you, and we'll take the chip back when you're 65. You might remember it, you might not, but that's when we're going to take the data back. And I was
That's
like,
incredible.
yeah, I was like, whoa, dude, holy crap. I was hoping for something more meaningful, right? Like, oh, this is going to be the start of this awesome intergalactic relationship, and I'm going to like find out more about what's going on and this human experiment. And because I think Earth is a lab planet. I really believe that. I think we were seeded here. We're a hybrid for chimpanzees and some extraterrestrial beings. I believe that with all my I'm part of the ancient astronaut theory for sure. And that's because I'm never going to try to convince anyone of these things or say that they should believe these things. I wouldn't have believed it myself unless I had this crazy experience in my life, but it happened and I did. And it was one of the most profound changes of my life. It made me really open up my mind to what is that? Because that's been the big question, right? Why are we here? What's going on? Are the religions right? Are these other philosophies right? Is science right? What is actually why are we here? And I believe I got my answer, I believe it now. So I never would have talked about this even 5-6 years ago, like on this kind of platform. But so thank you for allowing me to do that. And now we're seeing, right now it's coming out. U.S. government's admitting, these whistleblowers are coming out. All these pilots are coming out saying, yeah, we chase UFOs all the time. I just went to West Virginia, to the East Coast to do this Tony Hawk building jumping event. And we were out partying that night, and I met an F-18 pilot who I didn't know. And I just was shooting the shit with, and I just made a joke like, hey, do you guys by the way, do you ever see any UFOs while you're flying and he's like, and he kind of looked at me kind of like funny, and he's like, yeah, actually I chase them a lot, actually. I pretty regularly. And I was like, whoa, like, okay, here's this random pilot I just met at this event who's openly talking about it. And now, all that guy, the Tic Tac videos that the U.S. government admitted was theirs, that was a leaked document. Or if you know the whole backstory of that, but some guys in the Senate got involved because they realized there's all these black budget operations going on that are outside of the congressional hearing and any oversight at all. They probably did start as a regulatory government body back in the 50s and 40s when all this started happening originally. And now over time it's become corporatized and kind of sourced out from the government so they could have more power and more leeway to do what they want. So without oversight, right? And so some guys in the Senate realized that, and they secretly got a couple $100 million in this little bill they passed. And so it took them 10 years. This is the result of 10 years of research they put in. They started it during the Obama administration, went through the Bush administration, went through the Obama administration, and then 1 year into the Trump administration. And that's when they finally, after 10 years of research of digging through the government, were able to leak some of these documents. That's how those F-18 pilot videos got out in the first place. It's because guys in the government are realizing they're being bamboozled too. It's not even these black budget operations are outside of the parameters of the government. And this is what's now the government's waking up and saying, oh man, we're being hacked too. We're being tricked.
Don't know what the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing.
Yeah. And so now there's all this momentum and there's all these people coming forward and there's a ton of them. There's so much evidence now. It's not even a question.
Yeah.
There's hundreds and hundreds of ex-military and military guys that are still serving right now in radar positions, in nuclear missile positions, in piloting positions, CIA positions, and working in Area 51 positions with the propulsion systems and retro-engineered stuff from back technology, whatever. There's so much data now. It's irrefutable now. People, if you just look just past the first layer of garbage that's out there on the internet and you just start digging a little bit, you'll start realizing. And I really encourage people to listening to watch Unacknowledged. Dr. Stephen Greer, he's one of the forefront guys of this whole research, and he actually has real data and real research for 20, 30 years of research that he's put into it. And he's the one that got all these whistleblowers to come forward under oath and talk about what they went through in their military experience. And there's a lot of speculation that the whole reason there's any interest in us in the first place is because of our nuclear technology. They say since we detonated the first atomic bomb in 1945 or whatever it was, then 1947 was the Roswell crash, right? And then all of these incidents, especially in the 50s, there was tons and tons of sightings, and the people, it became normal.
When nuclear bombs were being blown off constantly all over the world.
Exactly. And they're like, oh, look at these monkeys with these crazy weapons now, right?
Yeah.
You know, because there's a theory that when we detonated the atomic bomb, it's not only tearing the time and space fabric of our reality, but it's timing the time and space fabric of their realities too. Because if you believe in multidimensional experiences, like quantum theory talks about, you know, we're in the third dimensional reality that we're in. There's fourth, fifth, and so on, you know, right? Like we assume when the time is the fourth dimension. If you're able to travel through interstellar travel, you're manipulating time, right? Because you're going through time and space at such a level. We can get into, you know, and the whole propulsion system behind that and why this technology has been hidden from us for so long. This is another question, right? Is because this type of technology would completely free us from the petroleum cartel, right? From all of these big things that are destroying our planet, right? Right in front of our faces. We're in the middle of what they call the global boiling now, right? We're watching it unfold. There's no reason for us to be using this technology and what's super outdated, except for the fact that it keeps the power where it should be, right? If you gave free energy to people, you gave them a device that could just harness out of the ether electricity and power for everything, all your resources and all your needs, you would have no need to be on the grid anymore. You have no need to be dependent on the system anymore at all. Everyone, it would completely be a complete shift of power, right? And everyone, so no one that is in the 1% wants to do that, right? If you were a gazillionaire, lived from passed down generation to generation, then you know that's not going to be your agenda. So yeah, that's all conspiracy theory and whatever, what have you. I've delved deep into this because I had a real interaction with 5 other people. I wasn't in my dreams. I wasn't by myself. I wasn't, you know, I have so much data, empirical data from what happened, and for me that it became irrefutable for me. I based a lot of my studies and research off of that experience, you know. So, and that was so that's 21 years ago that happened.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. That's a big story.
Yeah,
there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot in there. I think, the big piece of it, we can all identify with elements of it. I want to touch on a couple areas. One is hypnotic regression, being the tool that you utilize to help get inside yourself to be able to dig deeper into what actually happened, because our emotional body tends to shut things down because we don't want to feel them, or they're scary. We're protecting some part of us. A protector arrives and like we don't feel that anymore. And so I want to tie that back to something that you touched on earlier in the podcast, which was about men not being allowed to have feelings, right? That men not being allowed to be afraid, right? So, we all have been there. You and I know each other very well, that we've had these coping mechanisms that we've crutched on heavily to shut down emotions that we don't want to feel, right? Whether that's alcohol or drugs or addictions of whatever kind, right? And we can all think of easily a list of our friends and family members who have these same challenges, right? And so there's this programming that comes to our culture, which is like, don't be weak, don't have fear, don't feel pain, don't be afraid, don't be, whatever derogatory word you want to throw at the end of that sentence. And then, so we shut them down, we put up our coat of armor, and then at the same time, we don't have the skills. We don't know, there's no way these things are going to continue coming back. And sometimes they're hard to unbury. It's like archaeology of the soul, right? And I'm a huge fan of archaeology and human history, and I love paleontology and ancient writings, and there's petroglyphs all over where I live. I live covered in petroglyphs everywhere.
Yeah,
so
with aliens on them.
Aliens, yeah. So you can walk around, you look at these pictures drawn on the wall thousands of years ago, and you're like, oh, that's an alien, that's a spaceship, And so it's pretty obvious sometimes, right? Like it's super obvious. And so I wanted to ask you a few things on the hypnotic regression piece, because I've also done this for myself, and I was blown away by what came up for me. I had no idea that these stories were within me, and I had all these previous lives that I'd lived. So tell me a little bit about what is hypnotic regression? How does it work? And
people have a misconception about it, thinking that someone puts you in some spell or something, and then you just do whatever they tell you to do. And that's not the case with this kind of therapy. I've seen videos of people doing weird stuff like that, but what I did was basically it's almost like a meditation. They're using key words. I think it's a lot around that, how they word everything and how they guide you through the process. I just felt like I was in a meditation, just like any other meditation, except for that I had a guiding voice there to kind of tell me where to direct my consciousness. I had some practice when I was younger with doing some past life regressional work and stuff like that, where it was a similar experience. It feels like you're just getting your ego out of the way and trying not to expect or imagine anything. You don't want to just tell some phony story from your imagination or because you want it to be a certain way, like I had no clue that I would have thought that I had been taken into an underground base, for instance. That was never in my mind, not 1 second until I said it, right? So that was surprising to me. I was sure that I'd been taken up from a ship, right? Or something else had happened, not that I'd been taken down to some base. That came out of nowhere, like left field for me. So I knew I wasn't making this up. I wasn't trying to imagine that was the story. The best way to do it is to get yourself out of the way and stop trying to hope for a certain outcome or imagine that this is what I want to be the truth or the story. You just have to just kind of be non-attached in a way, like kind of Buddhist about it, and just say, okay, I'm just going to let my consciousness speak and see what happens. And I did. And that's really the gist of hypnotherapy, right? And the people have a good success with quitting smoking, with all kinds of stuff with hypnotherapy by making these suggestions. And it's just a way it's like a back door through your subconscious, So, you got like these firewalls in your body and your subconscious to protect yourself from trauma, from bad things that have happened. And so you have this maze of things you need to get through in order to get to the truth, where the hypnotherapy is kind of like this back door where you can just kind of sneak around the back and just get into the subconscious. And I was very surprised with what came out of that session, honestly. And I know a lot of people that have done hypnotherapy for other reasons say the same thing. So I highly recommend. I'm really curious about hypnotherapy, honestly. It's something I'd like to incorporate because I have a master plan to try to, I'm going to school now to become a respiratory therapist, which is all around the heart and the lungs, right? And that's one of the heart is my biggest fascination. And so I want to build a practice outside of that job, because that's going to be in a hospital, medical, Western medicine setting, where I'm going to make more of an integrative, holistic medicine practice. Now that I'll have all of that background understanding and science of how the heart and lungs work, I want to be able to incorporate that into breath work, into hypnotherapy, into things like that, where I can create like my own practice out of it, and use that information. Because for me, it's what's so interesting about the lungs and the heart. Those are two things you can manipulate with your consciousness. You can slow your breath works automatically, but you can also change it by thinking about it. You can slow your breath down. You can speed your breath up. You can choose how you decide. But if you don't think about it, your breath is automatic. Same with your heart. Your heart always works from the minute you're born to the minute you die. But at the same time, monks and people good meditation practice, they've been proven to be able to slow their heart rate down with their mind, right, with their consciousness. So those are two windows to the subconscious. When that's the key. Almost all meditation practices have to do around the breath, right? Yoga, everything, all around the breath. So the breath is that window. It's that gate. It's that keyway to the subconscious, just like hypnotherapy. And so I'm fascinated by that, because we're here in this conscious mind thinking we're making all the decisions, but you listen to anyone that knows anything about science, where 5% of your waking mind, of your consciousness is your waking mind, right? The subconscious is 95%. So you got all these subconscious programs going on in the background all the time, telling you how to think, how to feel, how to act, how to respond. And it's not really your conscious mind that's making the decisions. So in order to change anything, you have to learn how to get into the programming and change it from the inside. If you do that, then if you start to change the programming and upgrade the programming, you're basically upgrading your hardware. You're getting a new version of Mac OS or whatever operating system you're doing. You're upgrading that system so that it's default running at a higher vibration than it was before. And you can do that. You can do that with your consciousness through these gateways, through your breath, through your heart. You can use these gateways to get into the subconscious, and you can actually start changing the programming.
I want to push off this point, because there's a really, we're talking about alien intelligences, right? And higher intelligences, or intelligent design, right? We're talking about God.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking about absolutely everything. We're talking about like alien species, our own consciousness, our ability to manifest and control the universe, our ability to look into our past and our futures and really see it all for it is. And I want to go back on my own journey a little bit because you've been key in this, in my own story here. I was a Christian upbringing. And as soon as I got old enough to start making decisions for myself, around 12 years old or so, 13 years old, I decided I'm not going to believe what I've been told anymore. And I'm actually going to take an agnostic position for a while where I'm like, I don't know, because obviously that doesn't make sense, but there's things about it that are good. And that doesn't make sense, but there's things about that are good. And I could see the balance and everything. And so I went for a period of being agnostic and then actually kind of fighting with this first atheism, right? Like, no, I'm just rejecting, there's no God. And then going, well, actually, I don't really know if there's a God or not, and accepting that myself. And then sensing the nature of things with psilocybin was a real, like, I was starting to see, my eyes were starting to open and I could see, I'm like, there's more behind the curtain. I started to see behind the curtain. And then obviously the one that completely blew me out of the water was DMT. When I started to use DMT and explore that compound, and that transitioned into ayahuasca and 5-MeO DMT, these compounds opened me up to the infinite interactions with thousands or more of intelligences, right? Entities, beings of all types and descriptions, beings that are like as simple as kind of a blob of liquidy substance that has its own intelligence that's doing a little job, kind of like a cell does in the body, all the way up to like incredibly articulate and wise and old archetypal beings that have been through infinite numbers of lives and versions of themselves to have matured to the point that they're at, to God itself and Buddha, Christ, Allah, like all the beings. I've now come to this place of like, holy smokes, right? Like I couldn't even possibly dream up the shit that I experienced. And when I felt like this is outside of my own capability, that was one of my very first deep thoughts with DMT. It's like, this is beyond my scope of imagination. Like what I'm experiencing right now, I could never come up with this, no matter how, if I spent the rest of my life trying to draw comic books and write fiction novels, it would never get this wild. It would never be this incredible. And so alien intelligences, whether they be kind of, third dimension, fourth dimension, fifth dimension, 11th dimension, there's been this big initial like fears within myself, but I've always felt safe. Like I've always felt like these intelligences, these beings, these other dimensional archetypes have always had my best interest at heart, right? And I can remember one experience specifically of interacting with a really powerful entity and that being taking control of my body. And I was terrified. It felt like there was this claw, like an eagle claw, that reached down and pierced my chest through my rib cage, and the claw grabbed a hold of my sternum. It didn't go around my heart. It very precisely, the claws interlaced behind my sternum and picked my rib cage up from the sternum, leaving my heart and lungs behind. So that as it picked me up off the ground, it expanded my rib cage and all the air rushed into my mouth. And I was like, I'm breathing and I'm not doing it. And then I had that realization, I'm never, as much as I choose to breathe, my breathing's happening automatically all the time anyway. So this is a version of God telling me, I'm always breathing for you. I've always had you. And then it put me back down and it pressed on my sternum, pushed me into the ground, and exhaled all the air out of my chest cavity, and all the air rushed out through my mouth and my nose at the same time, which is kind of like puking air, like very assertively. And I heard this like weird, like my nostrils kind of like snoring kind of sound. And then it picked me up again and put me down again. And the only thing I could do at the time was just relax and let go of fear and just be like, don't be afraid. Just let it happen and just accept what's here for you. And the lesson of it all, and that big breath rushing in and out. And so I've had my own experiences with this, like alien intelligences and higher powers and deep spirituality, and having to kind of take my own seat at the table there of being like, yeah, I may be a lab rat in one scenario or being taught a huge lesson by some massively powerful energy, but I'm also that being as well.
Well, yeah, and the lab rat thing is because we human beings have such a high potential in the universe. It's ridiculous. That's why, is because the Greys, those guys are stuck. The Greys are they depended on technology, and I believe the human beings will split in the future. They will create different species, and I think the Greys are one version of a species that we create. I think there are descendants from many, many thousands and thousands of years in the future. I think they're coming back because they're stuck. They genetically bred out their emotions from their DNA. They manipulated purposely that way so that they thought that would create more harmony in society. It would weed out chaos and problems and unknowns. But by doing that, they basically cut off their connection to source. Right? The universe needs chaos as much as it needs order, and the emotions represent that. Right? Emotions have a core raw energy that you can't replicate from just computer hardcore data. It's like
the heart.
Yeah, the heart. The heart needs the mind needs the heart. So they came back to figure out how to. That's why they're doing any kind of hybrid tests, any kind of experiments, is to try to learn how to have emotions again. And I realized that they're not evil. The Greys aren't bad, but people always perceive it as that they are because they don't have emotions. They don't have an emotional repertoire at all. They're just organic computers, and so they don't see that they're causing trauma. They're just following the protocol. They're just following what they need to do to get in a result, right? So they're just scientists. They're just complete empirical scientists with no emotional data at all. They're trying to learn from us how to get emotions back again. So we are like, human beings' potential is so high. They say that we are a hybrid of many species. Something like 8 or 9 species have their little DNA kicking with us over the millennia. We're some kind of experiment, I believe, that has the potential to become, I think, a super highly evolved ascended being. And I think we also have that. We're at the tipping point, right? We can see it. Everyone knows it right now. We're here this lifetime right now. It's happening. If you don't think that, just open your eyes and look around what's happening.
Yeah,
man. We are at the boiling point right now. And it's work. Everything's coming to the apex right now, and it's a race, right? It's either going to be annihilation, it's going to be some kind of form of complete mind control that's going to try to go on still. All the old ways are scraping at the bit. But I don't know if you've been feeling this, which I know you have. We talked about it, and I know everyone I've spoken to, the vibration is raising on this planet too. The planet's vibration is raising, and it's happening quickly. It's like like telling us, you want to get on board, because if you do, this is going on. I felt this instant, like, just gut feeling. I have to change my lifestyle now. I have to get on the ship. I can't. And to do that, I got to quit. I got to quit all the substances. I got to start meditating every day. I had this list of things that told me. I was in meditation, and I got this download, and it was like, you need to do these things. You need to raise your vibration. You need to prepare. And I was like, what do you mean? Dude, I'm good. Like, what do you mean by that? And it's like, you need to prepare. And it was some kind of, I don't know what the being was or what was talking to me, some kind of higher intelligence. And it was very clear, very loud, and it just said, you need to raise your vibration. If you want to get on board, you need to raise your vibration. This is how you do it. I said, okay. I've stuck to it since I had that. The message was very clear. And so I really feel like this is a really important time to be alive. And this is, I believe, my duty as a being. I believe that I believe in the spiritual warrior, right? I believe in the peaceful warrior. And that term warrior doesn't mean violence. It means peace and love. Though there's a way to fight against anger and hate by peace and love, right? By higher vibrational energy. It takes a lot more courage, a lot more strength to switch out of the old paradigms as what it means to be a man or what it means to be human, and change that whole concept and make it something new, which is something you can feel is true in your heart. Every time you think about it and go into your heart, you know it's true, you know it's right, you know it's what you're supposed to be doing, is getting the vibration of humanity higher. And that's all you can do. Like, you don't need to become president. You don't need to write a bunch of books. You don't need to like get a mass following on Instagram. You don't need to do any of that stuff. That's all distraction. We're all interconnected with our vibrational energy. Everything is connected. Everything is it's in the unified field. The unified field exists. We know that through science. Now this is being proven. We already knew that. Spirituality has known that for millennia already. But that's why Star Wars was such a hit. I talked about the Force all the time. That's he was tapping into something that's real. And so you doing you and raising your vibration, you're dropping the pebbles into the pond, and you're just doing it over and over. And if enough people do that, all those ripples from all those pebbles start linking, like we talked about earlier, creating coherence, and they start resonating. And when they start resonating, then you start building this massive field of energy. And I felt it like when I did that too, when I meditated with 2,000 people for a week, it was incredible. You could cut it with a knife. It was so apparent. You didn't have to have any spiritual awareness at all, any sensitivity to feel it. It was so powerful. Just seeing how people getting together and focusing on the same thing resonated to such a degree that it was so tangible. I mean, that's what TM's a super old type of meditation, transcendental meditation. I did it when I was younger. My mom was into it. And those guys have done the test. They've been doing the test for 40, 50 years now. They would bring 500 people to like a really impoverished area where there's lots of crime and murder and all this bad stuff going on. And they would meditate in a place for a week every night. They'd go there and meditate for however long they did it. And then they would study all the crime rates. They would get all the data from the police departments and all that stuff. And they would see dramatic drops every single time they did it. Like 40% drops in the crime rates, right? Would happen after they would meditate in a place for a week. So we're seeing how much consciousness changes and creates our reality, right? We're not just victims of reality responding. We are creating the reality around us as we go. And that's what we're starting to understand now. Our all shared experience of this waking thing we call life is all of our input together, creating as we go, from moment to moment to moment. That's where science is going. The new science is going to be consciousness. It's not going to be anything else. It's
the most interesting thing there is, right? That's the only thing that there really is. And so I've also I want to touch on a few things. I've been meditating for like the last 5 years, every morning and every night. And recently that's been kind of fluctuating. I've been feeling a lot of change in my life, and that's been I haven't been as consistent with it because I've felt like things are really disrupted, and I disrupted them by becoming aware of all the patterned things. And so the world's doing that on a grander scale. I mean, it's very obvious that as a species, we are all becoming aware of the patterns that we've been operating under as a grand species on Earth and going, these patterns are destroying our planet. These patterns are cutting all the trees down. These patterns are ruining the ocean. These patterns are making us fat and sick.
Yeah.
And most of us are going, we don't want this. And all it takes is that thought on a grander scale of going, this isn't what we want. Yeah. And then we start thinking about what we do want, which is health, happiness, peace of mind, loving family, beautiful lives. And the coherence wave that we're talking about, I was mentioning it earlier today, we were chatting, and when you put two subwoofers next to each other at the base frequency that comes out of them, when you move them close enough together, it amplifies when the waves join each other, the amount of energy that they produce actually goes up. And so this is what you're talking about, where there's like an exponential increase in the amount of this awareness happening, because it doesn't take very many. All you need is, if you were the only one in this apartment block that was thinking that way, it would be a soft signal. Right. But if suddenly the person across the hall feels the same way, and then the person across the hall, the other way over there, feels the same way, we've seen this in culture over and over and over again across the world, when cultures unite around a cause. And here it's on a grander scale, where across the whole planet, people have these greater awarenesses. Global warming is a huge, awareness, like this boiling point occurring. We're like, we need to do this. We got fossil fuels is another thing. Just our feelings around war as a whole. I mean, the earth is just going, we don't actually want to act this way anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, like that. I love that. If you're the example of if you were an intelligent species flying by Earth, and then your ship picked up that there was technology and there was species, there was evolved species there, and they're like, okay, let's scan that planet. Yeah, they do have a defense system. Oh, that's weird. All their defense systems pointing at each other. Like what? Like if you just think about that for a second, like oh my god, it's so bad. Like yeah, well they literally have nuclear weapons pointed back at each other.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous, right? Like
Yeah,
this
it's
is that
insane.
paradigm needs to shift. That needs to change in a big way.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Is like I'm a big believer in the fact that this technology that we're coming to our audience through today is the driving force between what is happening on the consciousness level. Is the internet has provided us real world feedback from around the planet. All of it, it's not controlled by a larger source, media, television, radio, saying here's what you get to hear about what's going on over there. Now it's just anybody with a phone can send out a signal about what's going on, and that algorithm is occurring naturally, because that's consciousness expressing itself. And yeah, it has all the chaos in it, and yeah, it has all the ego and the self stuff in it, but it also has all the we are waking up pieces to it as well. And that wasn't occurring before. Before the internet, when we relied on ham radio, CB radio, telegraph, telephones, all that kind of stuff, what mostly went out was very disparate and separate things. And we didn't have this global picture, not until the space programs only recently, where, we have the picture of the pale blue dot.
Yeah.
That's given us this perspective.
Overview effect. Yeah.
Yeah. And that change and this whole effect of aliens, astronauts coming back from their time in space and seeing their whole career and their life and the planet as a completely different thing.
Yeah, it's a profound experience. I would recommend any listeners to watch that on YouTube. It's called The Overview Effect. It's like a 20-minute little video. It's all these astronauts talking about how profound their experience was looking back at the Earth and realize, it's a massive paradigm shift for all of them. All of them super duper empirical scientists, no spirituality at all came back like monks pretty much, with way deep stuff to say about it. You're like, wow, that's a huge change in that person's consciousness.
And so this is another example of the micro and the macro, right? Where we're looking at the species as a whole from an individual person's perspective by leaving and stepping far enough away to change the perspective, to be able to see what that actually is. And then we can do that inside of our own consciousness as well. We're like, all I have to do is like listen to my thoughts instead of just being my thoughts and being in a state of reaction. It's a smaller scale of the same thing. Excuse me. And then in the same stride, we can change our body with the same thing, right? Where I'm like, my body may be, acting in a way that I'm not wanting to or happy with, like sickness or illness or whatever. And all we have to do is go inside of our body and start to see our body as a relationship to our heart and a relationship to our mind and a projection of those things. And I truly believe that what we manifest, our body manifests what we're ignoring.
Yeah.
And what we're putting attention to.
It manifests, exactly. Yes. Where you put your attention to is where your energy is, right? That's something that Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about a lot too. It's fascinating, right? It's just, you don't really think about that all the time in your daily experience. And this is something tying back to what we talked about earlier. This is my agenda right now, is learning to tie back all of these big, profound things, because we've all pushed things to the extreme to have these profound experiences, and we kind of gotten used to needing those profound, extreme experiences to give us this data. Now I want to apply that data to my regular daily life, right? And also to realizing every day you're making a difference, right? And also for all your listeners and people that are, tuning in, don't believe that you can't make a difference. It all started somewhere, right? So one movement, whatever movement it was, it started with someone along the way. Maybe not necessarily some public figure or anything like that, but the vibration starts somewhere, some fad, whatever, all these things that come and go. It all starts from someone doing something. And we can do that. That's the best thing you can do is keep applying the best version of yourself every day that you can. Keep trying yourself. For me, that's what I realized. I don't have to go and write some, crazy book or thesis or invent something. I don't have to do any of that stuff. I just have to keep raising my vibration. That will help other people to do the same thing. You set the example by raising your own vibration, and that makes other people want to come up and join you. Or it repels them and they won't be a part of your circle. But But the point being is, I think that's the best thing we can all do as humanity, is to really just keep focusing on raising our own vibrations to try to make a better future for ourselves and for our children and for all the future generations. I think I think we're at a place where we're running out of time. We can't keep going on like this. We need to make the decision as a people to come together and start to work together and to change the vibration and also the whole way that we interact as a society. We don't need to keep competing with each other. We don't need to fight over resources. We need to collaborate. We need to come together and harmonize and energize. And like then we do that, that's going to completely shift the whole way that we experience life as human beings.
Yeah, you said harmonize there, and I want to touch on that word real quick, because as you say, raise your frequency. As much as I understand that is a physical manifestation of like an enlightened being, is like one that vibrates at a higher frequency, literally on the spectral range of sound and energy. This is also like tuning an instrument, right? It's like harmony. You're going to sing in harmony with a choir or a band or whatever. Once you get if you're singing, you have to train your voice, right? So that you can tune it so that it doesn't go out of range and suddenly you're not in harmony with everybody else that you're performing with or singing with, harmonizing with, connecting with, vibrating with.
So right? You have to practice with your consciousness.
Exactly. Yeah. And this vibration thing, I mean, we all know what music feels like, right? Music feels amazing. And when music is a high vibration, when it is really uplifting and energetic and has this like rising feeling to it, it takes our souls and our hearts with it. And so music's been the saving grace in my entire life. Like from day one, music was the first drug for me, right? That just gave me something deeply, this is right. Like, this is good. This is like saving my soul, whatever. And there's been all kinds of versions of that from the beginning to today. And I just wanted to also, for the audience, take that concept of like raising your frequency and just say also tuning
totally.
The
yeah,
frequency,
that's a
right?
good point. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 100%.
And then that allows that harmony of our environment.
And how do you do that? Same way you work out. Right?
Exactly. You train it.
You train it. You got to train it. Yeah. So how do you do that? Right? Do you need to keep going into all these existential crises, into all these extreme things to do that? No, you can literally sit in your living room every day and you can do it. Right? You can do it. You can do it when you're driving in your car. You can do it when you're visualizing something for how you want your day to be. There's a million different ways to meditate. By the way, guys, you can do walking meditations. You can do sitting meditations. You can do yoga. You can do it. There's a ton of different ways to access that part of your consciousness and to tune it and train it to be more developed and just more attuned to the being aware of where you want your consciousness to be. What I kind of see it as is like it's like when you're really good at a sport, you pick up on the little details in the game way before you did before, and you know what's going to happen 3 moves before. And that's the same thing with your consciousness. You start picking up on how you're going to react and what your normal reactions or patterns are. And you start being able to figure it out before it even happens. And so you're able to apply that and then not make that same mistake anymore. So you're tuning your consciousness to be able to choose different neural pathways than you did before. And by doing that, you're changing your patterns and you're changing your habits. And then by doing that, you're raising your default setting. And so you just keep doing that and that. And I find myself when I'm making these old pattern mistakes, I find myself just wanting to go back to out of habit. It just doesn't feel good anymore. I just go and I do it anyway. And I'm like, and I go through the motion thinking it's going to do the same. And I already know before I do it that it's not what I want to do, but I do it anyway because I think, oh, this is familiar. And then I do it and I'm like, wow, okay, I'm done with that now. Bye. It's almost, and we've been talking about that. I think a lot of people are going through this kind of dark night of the soul right now where you're dipping into these really old ways, old patterns that didn't serve us, these habits that were self-destructive, that were negative. And I felt my nervous system was really fried the last month or so. I was like digging down and back in through my subconscious and releasing all of these old like nervous system pathways these patterns that I had imprinted in my nervous system is what it felt like. And I was just kind of letting I felt fried. I felt like my nervous system was frizzled at the end. And I was like kind of this release of garbage, like energetic patterns. And then I felt like a baby again. I almost felt like I was like starting over again. I had to learn like how to speak again, how to walk again, all these things. It's just, but at a different vibrational level than I was before. And if you were to listen to anyone that talks about what it means to ascend, how to raise your vibration, they all talk about some of these similar symptoms. So you often have to go back to the past and kind of regress a little bit before you can go forward. And being thankful for it as well, right? Like one of the main things that I've really been working on, which I think everyone should know or does know at this point, is gratitude, right? Gratitude is the ultimate state of receivership, right? It's when you are the most abundant, where you're the most complete, when you're grateful. And it's at first I like literally forced myself to be grateful every day. I was like, even if I can't think of anything to be grateful for, I'm going to force myself at the end of the day to think of something that I can say in my mind. I'm grateful for that. Right? Even if I was like Mr. Negative Nancy the whole day and just like couldn't think of anything great, and I'm going to do it anyway. And I just made myself do that every morning, every night. I would do that, wake up and think of something I was grateful for. And I'd do that every day. And eventually it would just change. All of a sudden I was just being grateful without thinking about it. And for small stuff, like some nice guy at the cashier, he was nice. He smiled. We had a good little interaction. I'm be grateful for that. Small, and that started building on that, and to the point where you're grateful, not only grateful for the good little things that happen, you start becoming grateful for the small little bad things too. Not the big bad things yet, that's harder. But first, it's the small bad things you should become grateful for. Like, I'm grateful for that I got, whatever, the fender bender, or I missed the opportunity to jump in, or whatever happened. I had to walk back down last night we had to do that. All those things, they start adding up, and you start being grateful for the negative things. Then all of a sudden that starts taking the power away from that negative experience and being attached and identifying with negativity. So because you're grateful for it. And so then the negative and the positive becomes equal teacher. It becomes your friend. They're both your friends. They're both your friends all the way through. There's no enemies. And then when you get to that point, then you're also elevating your vibration to another level. That's the cycles that we're going through. And that's what I've been really working on, trying to make gratitude with everything, with all of the things that have happened to me. And you can't just say it. Well, in the beginning, you can say it in your mind and you can try that way. But for it to really take, it becomes experiential. It's when you feel it. You feel it with all of your cells in your body. You feel it as an experience, as a memory, as an identity, as a knowing. And then it's not just a concept anymore. And that's just, I practice the same thing, flexing that consciousness muscle, that brain muscle, that heart muscle, bringing them all together and creating coherence. And then you're practicing flexing that to the point where you're changing the way that you're interacting with your environment and with yourself. And by doing that, you're changing your paradigm, and giving that opportunity for the people around you. I don't want to leave anyone behind or feel like I'm losing friends over this, or I want everyone to be on board, man. I want us to all go together. I love people. I love my friends. I love my family. I believe in humanity. All the news, all the media keeps trying to trick us to believe that everyone's bad and we're all here to kill each other and take advantage of each other. It's not true. Talk to anyone that's done any traveling. I've got a good friend, Marco, who just rode his bike from New York, the motorcycle from New York City all the way down to the tip of Argentina and Patagonia and back in, he said most people were nice. People are nice. Most people try to help you out. And he broke his BMW down a bunch of times, and guys would just drive by in the middle of nowhere and come and help him, and drive him miles out of their way to make sure he got somewhere safe.
Well, if we think about it, I mean, if we go back to the micro-macro thing, we're all just cells on a big body, right? We're not here to attack each other.
Yeah.
Right? So you think about the nuclear arms thing where we actually have our weapons pointing at each other. That's like an autoimmune disease gone haywire.
Totally, right?
Where we're like, we'll just kill ourselves. And we're like, oh, wait a second. We have autoimmune diseases because the immune system is being triggered by too many things. And what we really realize is like, actually, our bodies are really self-healing, right? Like the body just heals itself. I don't do anything. If I get a wound or I, hurt myself, I get a broken arm, I just put it to let it rest and it heals, and the same thing if I'm on my motorcycle brakes and, dude rolls up, can I give you a hand? That's the exact same process of the body healing itself as the planet healing itself, just saying, hey, part of you is broken. Can I help you? It's one cell wandering up to another cell on that exact same scale. And
don't believe the media. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely not.
And I need.
There's touch on fear. I want to hear you talk about fear because that's what you're talking about right now. The media is breeding fear, and you are somebody like myself who has spent a lifetime becoming arm mates with fear and becoming somebody that you
make it my friend. Actually, yeah. Yeah, I learned that through base jumping. That, you know, in the beginning, fear was just this overwhelming stream of information that I didn't know what to do with, and that I just tried to make sure I didn't get paralyzed by, right? And then eventually I learned that, oh, this is a stream of information that has important data in it, that it's not trying to scare me. It's trying to keep me safe, but also trying to make me aware of my environment. It's making me hyper aware of my environment. So learning to discern between my own fears, like just inner fears, and actually what the environment's telling me was the first step, right? It's like learning to tell the difference, because there's a cocktail of emotions in life all the time. Things coming and going, people's energies coming and going, different things kind of being battered and thrown all around you all the time. And so you have this instinct to react, right, with fear all the time, right? So just react. And that's one thing I learned is not to do. Like, don't react to fear. Let it. It's telling you something. Is it telling you to react? Not necessarily. That's you get past the fight or flight responses, and you start just listening to what the information is. It usually has something valuable to tell you that is helpful, and it doesn't need to perpetuate you into these kind of old ways of being and survival mechanisms that we're kind of coming from in our animalistic behaviors and the reptilian monkey mind kind of concepts, you know. So fear is like one of the most interesting things to me I've come across, because it triggers so much in us, right? And it triggers separation, like we need to fight for resources, like we need to survive, we need to make sure no one takes from us and we get what we need. And it creates this feeling that we need to compete against each other, right? We need to make sure no one takes what we need. I think the best way to understand how to evolve yourself out of that behavior is by continually understanding that you are not a mortal being. When you start connecting to your spirit, to your soul, when you start I've always had this feeling. I don't know why. Now I couldn't never put my finger on it in the beginning, but I knew that there was a part of me that couldn't die. I just knew it. I knew it when I was a kid. I knew it when I was older, and I felt like there's something inside me that I know exists outside of this body. And the first time it really hit me was when I lost my first friend. As one of my best friends, a motorcycle partner I used to race with. He died in a motorcycle crash, and he was in my early 20s, and he had an open casket before they cremated him. He was a Buddhist, and I saw his body. It was the first dead body I seen of someone I knew really well. And they strain everything and they put all formaldehyde, whatever, in there, and like you see this body, and you're like, that's not my friend. He's gone. Like he's a puppet. There's just like this shell, this meat puppet of this guy. Yeah, it was so clear. It was such a power. I'm really glad actually that it was an open casket, because I got this very powerful understanding of the soul was the person I knew, not the body. It becomes super clear. So that when you start identifying with that more and less with your meat puppets, the more you get out of fear, right? And out of feeling like I need to get mine ahead of you, and I need to make sure you don't take from me, and that you're able to step outside of that parameter bigger and bigger and bigger. And the more I've gone into my spiritual knowledge with that and feeling of it, like an experiential understanding of what my soul is, the more I've been able to not be in that response mechanism all the time, that we're getting fed with a lot. And so that's the only way, I think, to really kind of get out of it, is to train your consciousness to identify with a higher version of yourself, which I believe is the soul. And it doesn't mean that you disregard the ego. You need the ego. The ego protects your meat puppet. It tells you where to go, what to do, how to do. You need that still. But to also identify with this higher power that you have inside yourself.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful. Thank you. I really relate with I lost a really good friend of mine a few weeks ago, and I'm sad, and I feel that loss. But the first feeling I had was gratitude. The very first feeling I had was gratitude that I got to spend time with that soul in that body and share in such deep and meaningful ways, and be exactly how you've been today, which is open, honest, vulnerable, authentic, just truthful, and just sharing without any fear. And having those relationships, that's the life that I want to live, is the one that resonates with those values in place. And the more that I've been doing that, the more that is what surrounds me. And I believe that is exactly what you've been trying to share with this idea of like, hey, just be the person and the being and feel it and energize it and think it and breathe it and meditate on it and do all the things around it that bring it into being. And then it surrounds you as well, because this is what I've also seen in my experience. And I didn't feel a sense of loss when my friend left, because he's not gone.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Like the experience that I got was net positive, right? Like I got all these positive experiences, and I'm going to continue to retain those positive experiences that I had with that individual. I'm not going to have any more new ones. Maybe I might have some dreams. I might have some experiences where that person comes to me, because I've had that happen in my life too. And so it's all just this net positive experience. And I'm grateful. I don't feel that fear. For a long time ago, I decided, I'm like, I'm not really afraid of anything anymore. And I do have the like physiological fear responses,
Yes.
right? Like when it's healthy to not fall off a building or whatever, right? Like I gotta be aware when I'm at physical danger, perceived physical danger. But I also don't fear death anymore, because I also don't believe death is real, right? I don't believe death is real at all. I'm like, everything that I've ever seen doesn't agree with that.
Doesn't add up.
None of the religions add up with nothing says that it's final, right? It's all just transformation. It's the butterfly and the caterpillar, right? Like transforming from one to another type of energy, type of being. So I'm right there with you on that. And,
yeah, I just watched some little clip of this guy he'd been struck by lightning like 4 times. He had like he'd been dead for like 20 minutes, like twice or something, and he's an older guy, and he's just like, look, just so you guys know, I'll tell you, death isn't real. You don't die. Your spirit goes on, and it's cool to hear from someone who's actually died and come back. I've always been interested in those near-death experiences that people have had, or they flatlined and been dead and then had a memory of what happened. Some of them are really interesting, right? Where they're like watching the doctor do stuff while they're dead, and then when they get revived and later on talk to the doctor, tell the doctor exactly frame by frame what was going on,
while they were gone.
What was happening while they were dead. And the doctor's like, what the F, like that, yeah, that's exactly what I was doing. How is that possible, right? There's a number of those experiences. Very interesting.
Yeah. Jamie, I want to thank you, brother. I mean, just from the deepest bottoms of my heart, first of all, for our friendship. You mean so much to me. The number of times where we've had just deep, powerful hugs. I love your hugs. I love your kisses. I love the fucking handshakes that we have. I love the shares. I mean, we've been at ceremonies sometimes together, whether the ceremony has been sitting here talking, or whether the ceremony's been in an ayahuasca or at a Burning Man or on top of a building, or in revealing our fears to each other that we're still working to come past, and all of it just means so much to me, man.
Me too.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, man. Yeah. We covered a lot of bases there.
Yeah, I knew this was going to happen. I'm like, all we got to do is open the valve and Jamie will go for it.
Yeah. I was like, what are we going to talk about? He's like, everything. I was like, okay, let's go.
Sweet. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you too, Jay. Appreciate it. I love what you guys are doing with the show, and I look forward to the next ones.
Do you have a place where anybody can find you on Instagram or Facebook, or things that you want to put out there if people want to get in touch with you?
No, I mean, the only other thing I've done really is I did a show on Exit Point podcast with those guys that are doing interviews with base jumpers, and I share my information with I do urban jumping and my experience with jumping and spirituality, actually. So it's kind of in line with what we talked about, but just really going into the in-depth look at how I've identified base jumping with the spiritual aspect of it, and how much is given to me, just like ayahuasca, just like some of the other medicines we've tried. So that's really the only thing I've really been barking at. And aside from that, I just want to uplift I want to uplift humanity, man. I want us to do it together. I want us to do it hand in hand, and not fist in fist. I want us to be able to evolve the human beings together, and for there to be a positive future, not this doom and gloom one that we're looking at right now.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
If you would like a cost-free way to support the podcast, you can subscribe on YouTube. That'll go a long way. Follow on Spotify or Instagram, or leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to have deeper conversation and get in touch with myself, Melanie, or any of the Trust the Journey family, all you got to do is donate on Patreon at any amount. And Jamie, I'm going to add you to the Trust the Journey family now that you've been a guest on the show. And you can reach out. And that's a wonderful community of people who are holding this safe vulnerable space for each of us to be able to express whatever it is about our journey. And we have regular monthly chat calls, integration calls. So all those are available if you want to get to Patreon. Trustthejourney.today is our website. Everything's on there. Thank you very, very much. And remember, keep laughing, keep loving, and keep trusting the journey. Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks, man. Awesome.
Love you.
No, it's yours.